Welcome to episode 5 of the CUFI UK podcast for Zion's sake. My name is Alex and I'm joined by Alastair. And today we're not going to be speaking about current events, but we're instead going to have a special podcast on countering Israel Apartheid Week. Now, Israel Apartheid Week is a big lie that is spread around universities and campuses throughout the world, and especially here in the UK. And Alastair, you were privileged to interview 2 special guests.
Yes, that's right. Well, we thought we would tackle this topic because, as you say, the anti-Israel movement is recognizing this or running these events across campuses in the UK during this month. It's supposed to be a week, but actually it lasts for seems to be many weeks in different locations here in the UK and around the world. And it's very serious because, as you say, it is based on lies. It's based on a very anti-Israel, anti-Semitic narrative, and it is also placing Jewish students in very vulnerable situations on campuses. So I interviewed Jasmine San, who was a Jewish student, now graduated from a UK university, and she shared her experience and some of the things which are happening on UK campuses. She represents an organisation called Campus UK, which supports students that are on UK universities and colleges, and also her colleague Douglas Sandoval, who's actually managing editor for Camera on Campus. He's based in the United States, and he also explained a little bit more background of Israel Apartheid Week and why it is so wrong and the things that we need to be aware of. So let's watch that interview now.
Let's watch it.
So I'm very pleased to welcome both Douglas and Jasmine. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello. If I can just do the introductions to begin with. Douglas Sandoval is managing editor for Camera on Campus. He's a writer and public speaker. Douglas is a graduate of Fuller Seminary in California. Jasmine is you are the UK Campus Associate for Camera on Campus. Jasmine earned a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of East Anglia, where she also served as a Camera Fellow. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Jasmine, in a few moments, I'd be very interested to hear from you about what it is like currently for Jewish students who support Israel on campus here in the UK. But Douglas, I just wondered if we could begin by understanding and perhaps just sharing with those who are listening a little bit more about Israel Apartheid Week. Could we perhaps go back a little bit in trying to understand what the motives are behind this particular week?
Well, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. The first thing I'll say is that Israeli Apartheid Week is inextricable from the BDS campaign. The BDS campaign, if people don't know, is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against the state of Israel, and it was based around the anti-normalization policies that the Arab world took against Israel, and it's really a propaganda campaign intended to delegitimize the state of Israel, and also spread many libels and canards that have historically been weaponized against the Jewish people, now against the Jewish state. And so the anti-Zionists have been supporting and propagating the BDS campaign in an effort to broaden the reach of their cause, in an effort to make garner support from people outside of their echo chambers. And the way they do this is they find tangential ways to what I would call intersectional, and what many would call intersectional approaches to to promoting their libels. A very prominent one, which is the one we're discussing today, is the claim of Israeli apartheid. So we all know about the apartheid in South Africa from 1948 to 1994. South Africa the South African government instituted a division, a segregation of people, of white versus black, really a social economic segregation, racially based segregation, system of segregation that basically systematically marginalized and oppressed the black majority in South Africa, as well as minority people of color. And so the anti-Zionists use this claim of this apartheid claim, and they attempt to say, well, Israel is doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing to Arabs in Israel, and they're doing the same thing to Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza. And the fact of the matter is that this is patently false. These conflation, there are no comparable circumstances to apartheid in Israel. But of course, they try and get away with promoting this campaign, and they every year, the members of the BDS campaign, which include Students for Justice in Palestine, Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, a group that's very active in Canada, as well as in the UK, Palestinian Solidarity Committee, all of these organizations that are student-run organizations on campus, they run these campaigns based on this apartheid libel, and they aggregate many other lies on top of it to further compound, further delegitimize Israel, to further condemn Israel, all on the basis of falsehoods.
It is interesting that the term apartheid, I mean, you allude to it in the instance of South Africa, where of course it was part of the law at that time, and the fact that there is no apartheid law in Israel. In fact, we there is nothing that can be compared to apartheid. But it's a very emotive terminology, and we see this emotive terminology used all the time. But it actually minimizes the suffering which took place in real apartheid, doesn't it?
I would say so. I think we see this all the time. They're trivial. I mean, we don't even have to go too far. Let's talk about Holocaust inversionism, right? Where they will take the Holocaust and say, that the Jews are doing the same thing to the Palestinians that the Nazis did to them. I mean, it's a total nonsensical claim, but and it's very disrespectful, right? It's very it very much I think is manipulating and using this trauma, this collective trauma that right from within the Jewish community to try and I think it's about getting a reaction, Alastair. I really think that's what it's about, and it's about trying to take something that is very significant, something that left a mark. Racism in America, for instance, racial issues in America it's a very prominent discussion. So when people hear apartheid in America, in my context, that's right where their minds go to. They think Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. When they hear apartheid, it starts with, they may think of Nelson Mandela, but really what they're driven to is racial issues in America. And of course, the other side is using that to their, they use that to their advantage as well. They find a way to, claim that Israel is not only an apartheid state in the way that it was in comparable to apartheid South Africa, but it's also a racist state, comparable to the way that America is allegedly a racist country. So
it plays really on the good intentions of of people who are, and I think particularly well-meaning young people who obviously want to fight for social justice and fight against racism and etc. When it is deliberate deception and when it is based on lies, it is extremely dangerous, because we have seen from history the issues where various ideologies have been based upon lies and based on deception. But this, how do we reach young people who obviously want to be quite active against these issues, not being misled into taking a position against Israel? Because I think that is something that why I think Israel Apartheid Week is particularly, as I said, it's such an important thing when looking at the wider BDS movement. BDS, the boycott, divest, sanctions movement, is almost a non-military way of destroying Israel. Now, Jasmine, you are here in the UK. You attended university in England. Can you maybe just share perhaps the feeling among Jewish students currently on campus in light of some of these activities, and what is sort of the what extent is the movement here in the UK?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I went to university in England. I went to the University of East Anglia, and I personally think that people from London universities and people from further other places. I think it changes with each university each year, because it depends on the people in each committee in each society committee on campus, and it also depends on the student union that year. So from my personal experience, the student union when I was at UEA was pretty biased, and going to this university, like, I didn't actually I'd heard like you should be careful of anti-Semitism on campus, and I was aware that people dislike Israel and people hate Israel, but I hadn't actually faced it myself. So going to university and experiencing the student union not allowing the Jewish society, which I was a part of, to hold events, or the biggest one was the biggest problem was them trying to change and eventually actually changing the definition of, and the student union's adopted definition of anti-Semitism,
Right.
in the Jerusalem Declaration, or otherwise known as the JDA, to the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance
Okay.
Alliance.
So they changed it because the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, that's the thing which the government gave its seal of approval to, and institutions across the world have likewise, and I think a number of universities have adopted it. So are you saying that definition was adopted by the university?
So in my first year, it was when I first went to UEA, the JDA was adopted, and then it was changed in my first year to the IHRA, and then in my second year, which was 2021, in May 2021, which was during the Israel-Hamas war, they tried to change the definition again back to the JDA.
Okay. Now some people who are listening might say, well, that's great that there's a definition of anti-Semitism, something as a reference, but the reason I'm assuming you're raising this is because there is actually a difference between those two definitions, and I don't know if yourself or Douglas just like to explain that difference. between the two, because I think this has been a center of a number of discussions, both in universities and outside universities. So
it's really quite, I'm sorry, it's really quite simple. This is something that when at first these campaigns came out, well, first of all, let's talk about the way the other side came into this issue. They came on campus, or rather on social media and on campus protesting, Palestinian voices are being silenced. Anti-Zionist voices are being silenced, right? This is how, well, we're talking writ large, talking, at a broad level in the US, Canada, the UK, came out saying Palestinians are not being heard. So let's talk about let's actually talk about the argumentation. So their argument is Palestinians are not being heard because the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is, it categorizes certain aspects of their speech as anti-Semitic. Therefore, because it categorizes it as anti-Semitic, it doesn't allow them to freely express their point of view. Now, this is completely false on multiple counts. The first is that the IHRA definition is non-binding. So what does non-binding mean? It means that it's non-prescriptive as to what universities do with that information, right? So the IHRA definition states that anti-Zionism is anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. In other words, campaigning for, and I'm reducing this, but you can see the full list of examples on that are included in the IHRA, right? But in the field of, but the bottom line is, it draws this connection between the activities of the anti-Zionists, calling Israel an apartheid state, accusing Jews of comparing Jews to Nazis, et cetera, as anti-Semitism. But the university, so it categorizes it as anti-Semitic. It calls it out for what it is. But the university itself has to decide what to do with that. So, it doesn't in any way, the IHRA definition itself does not actually say Palestinians can't say this or they can't say that, or
so it doesn't remove criticism of the state of Israel. That's basically,
and in addition to that, right? So states that criticism of Israel as compared to any other country, right? Comparable to any other country, is not anti-Semitism. So when you look at it from both of those angles, the reality is they're just blowing smoke. They're saying these things, they're making a fuss about it, but in reality, they just don't want to be called out for what they're doing. They don't want to be called. They don't want what they're saying to be categorized as anti-Semitism, even though it very clearly is.
And this is, I think it's helpful just to maybe elaborate on this point, the connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think they often get conflated, and that for me was the reason why I decided to step up when I was at university and try and do something about it, because being anti-Israel is not okay, but then being anti-Israel is terrible, but being anti-Semitic because you think that you are being pro-Palestinian is kind of worse. And that's when student unions don't necessarily, and students themselves don't necessarily realize that they're being, they're spewing hateful information, and they're actually like contributing to this misinformation, which is so like vast on the internet about Israel and in the mainstream media. So I think, so the reason why like we need to try and change the narrative of young people generally in universities is because young people don't necessarily know what the facts are. And so like, that's why it's really great to have organizations such as yourselves and such as Camera, because they try and stay fact-based, and they make corrections in the media to focus on what's actually happening and not what people think are happening.
And I think, one of the important things, and Alastair, you hit the nail on the head when talking about the relationship between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is, when do you cross the line? When does something cross the line into anti-Semitism, right? That's a good, I think, that's the question. When does criticism cross the line over into anti-Semitism? And I think a lot of it has to do with how irrational and how nonsensical many of the arguments are. I mean,
so for example, comparing Israel to Nazi Germany, which is what people do.
Yeah, I think, in many cases they beg the question. It's a matter of, well, how do we, I'll give you a good example. We had a student that submitted an op-ed to a campus paper in the US. And the first thing that the editors asked him to do was, well, you have to explain how Israel is not an apartheid state. You have to make an argument. And he said, well, this isn't true to begin with. Why are you putting me in a position where I have to even defend? His article was not even necessarily about that. It was talking about a separate issue. I believe it was around water rights and some of the challenges of the Oslo came out of the Oslo courts. And what they rebuffed and said, no, you have to explain in your article how Israel is not an apartheid state. So you look at this, you look at the rhetoric coming from the other side, and it's not criticism. It clearly isn't criticism. It is an attempt to delegitimize and to delegitimize the state of Israel and to demonize the Jewish people. Zionist is just a dog whistle for Jew. They just, if you look at the rhetoric, we have articles on Camera's website where you can see side by side. We're putting the statements by, anti-Semitic canards over thousands of year old anti-Semitic canards right next to the rhetoric of a BDS activist. So-called activists, and it's almost interchangeable. Just change the word, take the word Jew, take the word Zionist out, and insert Jew, and you have classic anti-Semitism, classic anti-Semitic libels. And so that's why they campaign against the IHRA on campus, and that's why they push the JDA, because the JDA does not include any clause. It omits the issue of Israel altogether. So they like a definition that allows them to say, well, I'm just criticizing Israel. It's just about Israel. It's a political thing. It's all political. It's political activism, social justice, so they love that because it gives them, it basically allows them to get away with what they're doing, which is putting hatred and incitement against Jewish students. Go ahead, Jasmine.
No, I was just thinking that actually reminds me of when I was on campus and I was trying to get an article about what was happening, about changing the definition from the IHRA to the JDA, and the anti-Semitic graffiti in Norwich and the pro-Palestinian marches and some other things too. I won't go too into it, but I tried to. There was a student council meeting where things are voted on. So where the JDA was voted in, and the Jewish Society, we were told about it a week before, or maybe even less, about a week before. And I was the Jewish representative, so I'd be able to speak and vote on the issue, but I wasn't actually able to vote in the end because of a bureaucratic issue with me apparently not having informed them that I would be the Jewish representative or something, but we had informed them. So it was like an excuse in order to not have a vote from us. Not that necessarily it would have made a difference, but we weren't able to vote on the own definition of anti-Semitism, which is ridiculous. And they muted my microphone when I was trying to speak. So, and then after that, I tried to get a piece written about it, not just about that, but about the anti-Semitic graffiti and everything else I mentioned in the student paper. And they kept like rebutting it and giving me criticism and like telling me to rewrite it, which I did try and do, but it was just, in the end, they didn't allow it because they said they'd already covered information on the JDA and the IHRA before, but they hadn't. They'd just covered the student council meeting.
Right.
But they did it in a way that did not favor, that they did it in a way that did favor the JDA rather than the IRA, and did favor the pro-Palestinian, the anti-Zionist narrative.
Yes, I mean, just it just reminded me, sort of combination of these thoughts here, that when there is a conflict, when there's a flare up in the conflict, we probably hear a little bit more in the news about things which are taking place on campus. What is the sort of like the climate like? I mean, your own experience, but in terms of what you're aware of nationally here in the UK, what is the climate like when it comes to really what students might be facing every day? Because Douglas made the point about, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism being used as a cloak for anti-Semitism. And it is quite incredible when we see some of these things, part of the anti-Israel movement, where they are effectively, they are quoting, even though, people like Hamas, and showing support for Hamas and things like that, which is again, showing a support for, anti-Semitism, it perhaps indirectly, but definitely it is an anti-Semitic motive. I mean, the founder of BDS himself, who was Omar Bagati, I've got a quote here. It says, "We oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Ending the occupation doesn't mean anything if it doesn't mean upending the Jewish state itself." I mean, that is a that is an anti-Semitic statement. So yeah, so I'm just wondering, what is the climate like at the moment in universities?
Yeah, so
Let Jasmine go first. Sorry, just wanted to.
I would just say it's very difficult for students generally, especially Jewish students, to speak up against the general like vibe against Israel on campus. So yeah, in the UK especially, and in the US too, but in the UK, from mine and my friends' experiences, and from students I now work with through camera, events to do with Israel, to do with Zionism, will receive a lot of backlash, whether it's from the student union itself, or whether it's just from other students, whether it's like during Apartheid Week, if they're making a mock Apartheid Week wall and having mock checkpoints to mimic what it's like in what they say it's like at Israeli security barriers in Israel. So they have all these different, like, they put these different performances on, and it does make people, like, it does make students look and give attention to it and believe it. But the thing is, like, people just need to, okay, you can be shocked at what you see and what you hear, but then you need to look into it and research it for yourself and actually question it, and don't just jump on the bandwagon just because that's what your friends are doing or that's what you see other people are doing. I don't really know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Douglas, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So I was just saying, in terms of like the when it comes to the situation in Israel, when there is perhaps a flare up in the conflict, how the anti-Israel movement, when it projects itself inside universities on campus, so how that can also then translate into anti-Semitism, or translate into a sort of a hostile environment to Jewish students. I was just wondering, but I appreciate you're in the US, but I was just wondering to try and get some assessment of the environment for students on campus that are
Well,
supportive of Israel?
well, the tactics are the same, and it's a matter of cropping out the context to make it seem like if Israel is just beating on the Palestinians. I mean, just look at I think what epitomizes it, and then I'm sure this figure is popular in the UK, South Africa, and in the US, and probably internationally, of Trevor Noah, the way that he, in his discussion on, this discussion on the Daily Show, went and said, it's like picking Israel is like, Israel is comparable to an older brother beating on his little brother. That's exactly what they do, is they take things, they use these false equivalences, and they will crop out the terrorism and the radicalism, the Islamism on the other side of the equation, and make it look like Israel is just firing rockets indiscriminately into Gaza, trying to kill as many civilians as possible. They're not ashamed to also call upon and employ different canards in an effort to make in an effort to try and make Israel look worse. They'll say that that IDF soldiers are out in the West Bank looking for a Palestinian child to murder. I mean, it's just the classic blood libels. I mean, you name it, they employ it, and it's unfortunate. Now this rhetoric translates to campus. I'm speaking about it because I'm speaking about it as blatantly as it is within the anti-Zionist camp, talking about Hamas and the PA. From the same rhetoric that you hear from the Hamas and the PA, you also see translate to campus. They're happy to just copy and paste whatever a PA official is saying, basically just contextualize it to campus. So if they're saying that Israel is out in raiding in conducting raids in the West Bank and it's killing a bunch of innocent civilians, if the PA says that, you better believe that some group on campus is also going to be the same thing. They toe the same line, and so it's all interconnected. It's all a propaganda machine, and all intended. We're talking about delegitimization and demonization. That's the tactic. And in good, when times are good, when times are bad, when tensions flare up, and also when tensions are lessened, they will do the same thing. When there isn't war, they'll say that Israel is pinkwashing, that it's really not a safe haven for LGBT for LGBT people. When there's rockets firing, with rockets about, they'll say that Israel is indiscriminately killing Palestinians. I mean, the rhetoric just doesn't stop. It's there day in and day out.
Yeah, and of course, probably also reinforced by what is happening on social media as well. I would imagine that has quite a strong connection to then what takes place on campus. Yeah,
of course.
People just share things without thinking about it. So they do the same with fake news stories on Instagram, and people see that and they're like, oh, and they don't actually look further into it. They just share it again. So it's just the spread of more misinformation.
Yeah. Jasmine, you made a really good point earlier about responding to these lies with the facts. Do you think that is the strategy in terms of, well, would you agree with me that is the strategy in terms of really countering the hate, is to present the facts as widely as possible? Because I was just hoping we might now just turn the conversation perhaps a bit more positively towards how we are able to respond with facts. Because let us just make it clear, and I think for the benefit of anyone who is listening who has any doubts, that Israel is not an apartheid. It is not an apartheid country. In fact, I think they should rename the week Israel is not an apartheid week, not an apartheid week. But can we just perhaps just share between us a couple of reminders about why Israel is not apartheid, just for the benefit of those that are listening. I'm not sure who would like to go first, but I think generally the main point is that Jews and Arabs have the same rights within Israel, and that's perhaps something that needs reiterating. So I'm not sure if Douglas, if you wanted to just perhaps begin, and then Jasmine, if you had anything to add, just to reinforce to people listening why Israel Apartheid Week isn't simply something that is not very pleasant to those who support Israel on campus, but is actually fundamentally wrong. It is fundamentally incorrect, and I think that's I think quite an important thing to highlight. So Douglas, I'm not sure if you would like to begin.
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in on this. So first of all, I'd like to say that we have to understand what apartheid is. I mean, just the fact that this campaign, going on 17 years now, is still a thing, and there's very much, students are still susceptible, to this canard. Just goes to show that, I mean, a lot of the history of South African apartheid, I mean, is just lost on people. They don't understand, colonization. They don't understand marginalization of people. They don't understand these racial issues. They don't understand the problem of racial issues under colonization. And I really think it's kind of ironic, because if you did, you would realize that what happened in 1948 was actually a liberation of the Jewish people who were living under conditions comparable to apartheid. When we're talking about Mizrahi Jews who were living in Iraq and in Syria and and Lebanon, I mean, these countries, these regions that really these and the Arab and Muslim lands, Jews were subjugated, treated as second-class citizens, right? And then if you look at look at how they were stripped, when tensions rose, they were stripped of their land, they were stripped of their rights, they were stripped of their jobs, they were stripped of everything, they lost everything. And those circumstances, I'd say, I wouldn't say, I don't think it's right to directly compare, but I could say there are a lot of similarities, a lot of congruencies between the oppression that Jews have faced and as a minority, and any form and other forms of racism and discrimination, including apartheid. So that's number one. As I think, let's put apartheid in context. Let's actually understand what it is, and let's look at other situations where people are actually being oppressed on the basis of their race, on the basis of their culture, and the basis of their ethnicity. That's number one. So, and then the second is to look at look at the situation in Israel. Okay, so what argument are they making? Israel is an apartheid state. That's their claim. In what sense? If they're trying to claim that Israel is a racist country within its own borders, within Israel proper, then they're sorely mistaken, because it's all citizens, Arab, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, all citizens in Israel have the same rights. They're all under the Israeli Declaration of Independence. They're all, Israel is a very progressive country, and it's been very inclusive of people from the very start. So if an Arab is born in Israel, they have the same rights as a Jew born in Israel. They have they have all the same access. Now, are there issues with minorities? Absolutely, just like you would find in any country. But is it apartheid? Is it segregation? No, there's no separate bathrooms for Jews and Arabs in Israel. There's no, there's no roads for Jews, roads for Arabs. Like, these claims that they make are all false. These situations that they conjure up in their mind just don't exist in reality. And when it comes to the situation with Israel on the West Bank, well, I mean, what would they want? Would they want Israel to, the people living in the West Bank and the people living in Gaza are not citizens of Israel, right? They have the respective governments the respective governments that are responsible for them. What would they want? When they say that these people don't have rights, that Israel doesn't give them rights, well, what would they want? Israel to annex these territories? Is that what they're arguing for? I mean, it's insane. If they want a sovereign, if these, the people living in the West Bank and Gaza, if they want a sovereign, if they're looking for, by the way, camera doesn't take a stance as far as any solutions to the conflict, but if they're advocating for a sovereign Palestinian state, then the last thing you would want is another country coming in and giving those people citizens, giving those people citizenship and rights, right? Because in that case, it takes away the sovereignty of the Palestinian Authority and the government in Gaza. So, these are, if people have grievances with they say that there's, injustice in Gaza or injustice in the West Bank, then they have to go to those governments to understand why those injustices exist. Why, Palestinians are still living in refugee camps to this day. Why there's corruption and, embezzlement and, misuse of funds and resources within those territories. So, this is what generally speaking, this would be my response is to try to evoke a paradigm shift with those people that are making such claims. And if not them, the people that are listening to the discussion and actually presenting the facts to people who, have no stake in this conflict, know nothing about the conflict, but are hearing these horrible things about Israel, these horrible things about what's going on between the Arab-Israeli conflict, so that they can know the truth and they're not so easily indoctrinated and, sold the propaganda by the anti-Zionists.
Yeah, very good. And Jasmine, do you have anything to add to that in terms of presenting the facts in opposition to the lies that we're receiving, we're hearing? Yeah.
Well, I think Douglas basically covered it all, but yeah, I think it is really important to keep working on getting the facts out there so that the general population of people will hopefully educate themselves properly, rather than just seeing something that says, or joining a march, a Free Palestine march, and just joining just to join in, but they don't actually know Free Palestine from who, not from the Israeli government. So yeah, like Douglas said, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like Douglas said, with Palestinians, if the number of Palestinian refugees is in other countries surrounding Israel is a big indicator of how these Palestinian people are not treated well, but they're also, it's not the Israel cannot be the scapegoat for people.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about these refugees. These are Arabs living in Arab countries, but they're treated as second-class citizens. I mean, I've been to, and I've seen the way that Palestinians are relegated to working blue-collar jobs. You don't really see Palestinians in government like the way you see Arabs or Palestinians, however they might identify. I mean, even within Israel, you have people that identify as Palestinian, right? They're Arab Israelis, right? Because they have Israeli citizenship, but they might identify as such. And they're living they're fully integrated in Israeli society, working jobs, high paying jobs, represented in government.
Yeah, because they have citizenship, and so they have these rights.
But the Arab world refuses, many countries in the Arab world refuse to actually give Palestinians rights because they know if they did, that it would put an end to the conflict. So they've decided to perpetuate it by keeping them as second-class citizens. So it's really also, many of these claims are a matter of projection. That what they say Israel is doing, many of these countries in the Arab world are in fact doing.
Yeah, it is a bit. There is a hypocrisy there, certainly, and now that's really helpful. And Jasmine, there might be people that are listening who themselves are students or are going to be students soon, going to be entering college or university. Perhaps there are parents or grandparents whose young ones are going to be entering university or college soon. if a student is wanting to get sort of connected with other like-minded students in relation to supporting Israel on campus, we can give some information on the screen or in the description after. But what is sort of the route in order for students to sort of that want to be involved, make a connection? Does does CAMRA have various connections on different universities? But would you like to explain that? And then perhaps Douglas would like to just finish by explaining a bit more about the project this week, or at this current time. But Jasmine, I'll let you go first.
Sure, yeah. So there's CAMRA and then there's CAMRA on campus. So CAMRA on campus is where campus advisors in the UK, which is me, will help will help current UK students with providing a community for them to hear other Zionist voices and help them deal with any bias they encounter on campus, and also promote the truth about Israel and the truth about Judaism and Christianity and Jerusalem, for example. Like we help them put on many different events, like they can invite different students, social events, educational events. Like we've had Hen Mazigin a few times, who is an Israeli activist, and students really do enjoy this stuff, and CAMRA can help these students in many ways. So I would definitely encourage them to look at CAMRA on Campus, the website, and they can apply for the UK fellowship through there, and they can just get in contact with me. I can give you my email after, or with any of the CAMRA staff, and they can kind of direct them into what to do, because we also have students who are on the coalition, which we're basically in touch with them. They don't have to write articles and put on events like we would ask them to do in the fellowship, but we just ask them to be our like eyes and ears on campus, and we are their eyes and ears on campus, so we can be checking things for them behind the scenes. So that's what I would probably suggest, and then through us that we can put them in touch with other organizations that like UK Lawyers for Israel and Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, for example. Well,
it's really good to hear that there is support for students that are Zionist, Christian, Jewish, and who are able to connect with other students and get support if they are also in a situation that they need support too. So that's really encouraging to hear. I should imagine perhaps for some students it might otherwise feel quite they might be quite isolated in some situations where there's not a network. So that's really, really good. And obviously here at CUFI we want to be able to counter some of these things as well. We've campaigned regarding Israel Apartheid Week on campus, and also regarding the definition of anti-Semitism, trying to get that adopted by universities here in the UK. So I think we're on the same page when it comes to wanting to counter the lies with the facts, and it's really good that there are some practical ways in which students can be helped and can be supported and equipped. So yes, we'll share some of those details, Jasmine, and Douglas, regarding CAMRA, and I know that the organization is particularly concerned regarding Israel Apartheid Week, which is currently taking place. I know I've seen various dates. I understand that Israel Apartheid Week is sometimes lasts for a month in some advocacy in some groups. But perhaps you'd just like to explain a little bit more about the resources that you've produced relating to this.
Definitely. So, I mean, first of all, I'll start off by, saying that camera was there for me when I needed them. I was a graduate student at Fuller Seminary, and encountering many of the same lies that we're hearing spread during Apartheid Week. Israel is an apartheid state, and even worse, not only the contemporary lies, but also a biblical case against Israel, or a so-called biblical case against Israel. People promoting, saying that Jews have no connection to the land, arguing that there is no Jewish indigeneity, that Jews are colonizers, that they're coming in, and so I just think that's important context. Camera was there when I needed help with refuting these lies, and standing up on campus, standing up in my lecture halls, speaking out and asking the questions that needed to be asked, to challenging the narrative, or having discussions on the quad with students who think they're advocating for a just cause, when in reality they're promoting hatred. And so that's what we aim to do. The Apartheid Week Exposed campaign that we're running, this month-long campaign, is to help students that were in a similar position to me, into a similar position to Jasmine, who also was a camera fellow, in a position that many of our alumni found themselves in, which is, how do we respond? And not only do we respond, but how do we equip and educate ourselves? And how do we take that education and employ it in practically? How do we practically employ that to make a difference, to shift the narrative on campus? Mm-hmm. And I can say that camera was the key. They were the key to turning the tide at my seminary. And I still believe today, now working for camera, that our strategies are effective at addressing the libels and canards spread during Apartheid Week. So we have a couple of ways that students can get involved and resources available to them. The first is our Apartheid Week Exposed website. That's apartheidweekexposed.org. And it's a apartheid wall. It's basically a reconstruction of a campus quad with an apartheid wall. And these wall segments all have the many lies and canards that you might find on a university campus. Israel is receiving too much military aid. Israel is, is an apartheid state. Israel is, taking, in prison, as falsely imprisoned Palestinians. I mean, all of these different things that you would hear on a typical day, on a typical day where a campus hosting Apartheid Week. And we refute it with all of the facts, with all of the brain trust of the wealth of knowledge of all of our researchers and all of our research staff across the UK, across Israel and the United States. We have a team of researchers that basically specializes in refuting many of these claims. And so we use all of their material to create this website. So that's number one. Additionally, the website also includes social media graphics, carousels that can be shared on Instagram and Facebook. So that if you're confronting this stuff on social media, or if you want to make people aware of the kind of lies that are spread during Apartheid Week, and a response and give a tactful response, we have carousels that you can share. We have graphics that you can share that refute many of these lies. And so that's number two. Number three is that these materials these digital materials, we also have printable versions available. So if you want to go, if you're a student on campus and you want to, you're confronting these anti-Zionist activists on campus, you can come out and pass out flyers and say, don't listen to what these people are saying. They're promoting lies. Here's the truth. Here are the facts. And so that's our Apartheid Week Exposed campaign in a nutshell.
No, that's fantastic. And yeah, we will certainly put some details about that apartheid wall And yeah, I've been onto the website, and it's got lots and lots of information, which will certainly equip those who visit it. So we will provide that. And yes, this has been a very helpful discussion. I hope it's been helpful to everyone who has listened. But I just want to thank you, Douglas, Jasmine. Thank you to you both for joining me today. And yes, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And it's really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Alastair. I don't think I gave you the Camera on Campus UK Instagram, but it's just Camera on Campus _UK. So they can follow that and then be in touch with us through there. And also they can email me at jasmine@camera.org, or also email Douglas. And yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And yes, we will obviously put those details also in the description. But yeah, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Well, welcome back. I hope you found that interview helpful. I know I certainly did. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, yeah, great interview. Well done with that. Sorry I couldn't be there for that one, but it was definitely a good interview. Yeah, I actually found it very interesting. I thought what they were saying, countering apartheid, was all very interesting. But something that really stuck out to me was when she was saying where Jasmine was saying how she and the Jewish student union and the Jewish groups were actually treated differently. And I just thought it was amazing. So she said that the Jewish student group was actually blocked from holding any events. She said that when she was the representative for Jewish students, she was stopped from speaking. They turned off her microphone. She wasn't allowed to vote because of some technical thing, but clearly they were stopping her voting. She was stopped from writing a newspaper article. They basically shut down the opinion of the Jewish students. And then more than that, they then voted on a new definition of anti-Semitism, which the Jewish students and Jews around the world oppose. And it just seemed so beyond anti-Israel. That is anti-Semitic to its core.
It always strikes me how those who are not Jewish seem to, or I'm not saying this broadly, but there are those who are not Jewish who think that they can define what anti-Semitism is and undermine the Jewish community on what Jews believe anti-Semitism is.
I know.
I mean, you would not expect that perhaps for other groups.
I know.
But yeah, that does seem to be, and of course, at the core of it is this anti-Zionism. And we obviously discussed how anti-Zionism is linked to anti-Semitism, or that it is a veil, a front, a cover, so to speak, for that.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And I think the funny thing is, like, a lot of these students would be the people who would describe themselves as anti-fascist, anti-apartheid, anti-racism. And yet actually what they were demonstrating there was fascism, apartheid, and racism towards the Jewish students. But I thought that was something that stuck out to me, because I never realized that Jewish students were singled out for being Jews, not just for being pro-Israel. And I think that's actually very scary, especially in Britain.
One of the things which I didn't mention this in the interview, but I thought that occurred to me quite strongly, is that as Christians, we do need to ensure that we are standing with the Jewish community and Jews that are on campus. Of course, the anti-Israel movement, Israel Apartheid Week, is an offence, or should be an offence, to Christians as much as it is an offence to Jews. Because as Christians, we should love Israel. We should be Zionists. I don't think you can be a Christian and not be a Zionist. And so this should really grate us as Christians. But in a practical way also, if there are Christian students, our hope, our prayer is that they will actually stand alongside, Christian unions will actually stand alongside in support of Jewish students as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think what Douglas was saying about how, we need to, he was saying at the end, like, we need to equip people and make sure that people are able to fight these battles, because ultimately the Jewish people are outnumbered by a long way when it comes to the anti-Israel bias. Like, Israel is a tiny nation. There's only a small number of Jews on the entire world, but especially like in universities, they are a minority there, and they're being singled out and treated this way. And so it's up to us as Christians, as a much larger group, to stand alongside them, like you were saying. But again, like you're saying, lies versus facts, combating lies with the truth, combating lies with the facts. And I think that's obviously a massive part of this battle. Like, what we're trying to do here is to explain the facts, put the truth out there. But I think there's a couple of things people need to bear in mind with this. First of all, we're up against it. Like, there's fewer of us than there are of them. And also, we've had this discussion personally before, me and you, where we've said about how easy it is to spread lies. Yes. In order to spread lies, you don't need to know anything. You can make up things and just throw it out there. Yeah. And that's what's happening. There's hundreds of lies being spread about Israel all the time. And yet, to counter those lies, you need to know a lot of information. Yes. And so we're there trying
true information.
Yeah, the true information. And so we're there trying to put together this information and counter these lies. But by the time we've countered one lie, there's another dozen lies that have popped up that we're trying to counter. And so hopefully what this podcast does, what that interview did there, what our organizations, Camera and CUFI, are doing, is trying to equip people so that actually we are, all the viewers and listeners to this are the people being equipped. They've got the truth, they've got the information, so they can counter the lies as well. And we can all work together to hopefully, get the message out there and to turn the tide against this anti-Semitic hatred.
Yes, and also, it does play on the good intentions of those who sort of have this desire to fight social, injustices and things like that. But if they'll be presented with the lies, if they're being presented with with these untruths, lies do empower evil. And we have to be, there's such an urgency, and I just feel that there is such an urgency right now in order to get back to the truth. And at CUFI we have this vision in order to reach the next generation, so that the next generation are equipped and understand the truth about Israel. And actually, just on a practical point of view, we've got some things in the pipeline here at CUFI in order to hopefully play our part in ensuring that students are equipped before they go to university. And we'll be hearing more about that in due course. But it is so important that the foundations for understanding about Israel, understanding about anti-Semitism actually starts, and it begins much earlier, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we're both parents. We have children we're teaching in hopefully in definitely the right ways. And we don't want to see our children growing up in an environment where, the truth is, there's an attack on the truth in every sense of the word. A lot of the biblical principles we have are being attacked, and so we're trying to raise up our children in the right way. And hopefully, like you said, if we can produce some materials from CUFI that can help equip parents with young children and children going to school before they get to those situations, so that they know how to deal with them, I think it's really important.
Douglas made some helpful reminders about why Israel Apartheid is a lie. And of course, there is no apartheid in Israel. Jews and Arabs have equal status, equal rights. There are Arab judges, there are Arab teachers teaching Jewish people in schools. There are Arabs in the media, there are Arabs in the Israeli military fighting alongside Jews for the same cause of defending Israel. These are things which are twisted, they're not presented. Arabs and Jews are sharing the same buses, they're sharing the same hospitals, they're sharing the same schools. And this is basic information there was actually, I just wanted to share an article because this really stood out. This is an article that we published in January, and it was some statistics regarding Israeli Arab Christians. Okay, this is Arab Christians. And the report showed that Israel is a safe and secure place for Christians. And it said that of the country's Christians, 75.8% are Arab Christians. This community represents 6.9% of Israel's total Arab population. And the report concluded that more than half, that's 52.9%, of Arab Christians progressed to further academic studies after completing high school.
Right.
Okay. A larger proportion than even the Jewish population at 48.2%, and both non-Arab Christians and Arab Muslims, both 31.2%.
Right.
It says that Arab Christians were overrepresented in law, mathematics, statistics, social sciences, and computer sciences in Israel's higher education system.
Right.
Now, I wanted to share that because it's not a competition. But, you know, we do not hear, the facts are not presented, the fact that Arab Christians in Israel are not only equally represented, but they are actually overperforming statistically compared with the average population, which I think is...
I know, it's amazing because the picture being put there is that Arabs are suffering under Israel. Well, actually, no, they're thriving. And that's the thing. And many people don't know as well, there's a lot of good projects out there where they interview Palestinians or they interview Arabs living in Israel and all these things. And actually, the majority of Arabs living in Israel are very happy living in Israel. They, it's not an apartheid state. And there's also another friend of CUFI, a South African gentleman. I don't know his name, but we've got a video of him talking about apartheid in South Africa as a South African, and then his experience going to Israel. And he shares a story of how his friend was sick in Israel, and he went to a hospital, and he was there as a black South African. And on one side of him, he had a Jewish Israeli, and on the other side, he had a Muslim Arab Israeli. And he said, hang on, I thought this was apartheid. Why am I here next to a Jew and an Arab? And they were talking together. They were friends. The nurses who came in and treated them were Jews and Arabs. It was like he was saying that completely broke down the apartheid lie to him because he witnessed for himself the truth of Israel, and obviously him traveling through Israel, seeing all the differences there. And he said that it was actually, like you said in the interview, it damages real apartheid. When this false accusation is placed on Israel, it damages people who really did suffer under apartheid. And this man did suffer under apartheid. And he's now a member of parliament in South Africa. Sorry, I don't have his name. But unfortunately, I think South Africa is one of those countries where this apartheid lie has taken hold because they are the country that was affected by it. When they hear these false accusations of Israel being apartheid, that is a red flag to South Africans. And we see that from their government, that they're one of the most anti-Israel nations now, unfortunately, because they've bought into this lie. And it shows how much this lie can spread and corrupt places. And I think that's a very sad testament to that. And hopefully that can be corrected in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, when it comes to social justice movements, there are, I mean, we don't need to go into them, but there are so many issues around the world of discrimination and injustices that do not get a week allocated to them. They do not get a month allocated to them. There's not a global movement of resources and personalities or driving towards demonizing a country, except Israel gets singled out. And that, I think, is one of the fruits of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and I definitely, and I think there, as Christians, we believe there's a spiritual element to this, and I think absolutely there is something driving that hatred, which takes it to a whole nother level. And as you said, there are real people suffering in the world who get no mention, no say at all.
Yes.
And then this lie, which is it's not even real,
Yes.
that gets all the attention. And
It's part of a much bigger plot, a much bigger movement. Okay, so did you have anything else to add, or otherwise I do have a scripture.
Yeah, if you want to share the scripture.
To close with.
Yep.
Philippians 4:8. I was thinking that all of us individually have a responsibility to personally understand what the truth is before we can expect to correct and right things that are happening on campuses or wherever it might be. We ourselves have a personal responsibility, and it is our prayer that we will be effective in communicating the truth. This is the scripture of Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things.
Amen.
And I just feel that is, as Christians, is such an important verse, almost to use as a measuring to assess what are the things that we are going to invest our time in, invest our thoughts, invest our resources, invest our finances, invest our support. The things that we're going to invest our heart in, our heart and soul and love into, are these things which meet this criteria of things that are true and pure and honest and lovely and are of good report, things which are truthful. And, we've made an assessment personally that when it comes to standing with Israel, standing with the Bible, it meets that criteria. We're standing on the truth. We're standing on the things of good report. When it comes to standing with Israel, we believe that we are making an investment of our time, an investment of our hearts, and everything that we are, because they are the things which God has determined to be true and honest. So
that's a really good scripture to end on.
And it is also by which we also can discern, because we need to have the spirit of discernment to understand what the lies are, what the falsehoods are, and actually we need to believe that we will be able to identify it. And we've identified it today in the form of Israel Apartheid Week. There are many other things, and there are many other things which go contrary to the Bible regarding Israel, which we need to have our antennae to recognize, to call it out, to call out anti-Semitism for what it is, to call out anti-Semitism for the evil that it is, and where we see it, and we're seeing it in the midst of our eyes here on campuses in the UK and around the world. We need to call it out for what it is, and we need to stand up and defend Israel and not accept it, and not accept it being taught to our children, not accept it being taught from lecturers in universities, and not accept it when we see it on our streets or in our churches or wherever it may be.
Amen. Amen. You're very passionate about that, which is great.
So so that was just a verse.
Good word. So is there anything else you'd like to add, or
no,
that's great. I think you said it all, if I'm honest. But this has been a great episode.
Thank you.
I really do. We really appreciate the people, Jasmine and Douglas as well from Camera.
Yes.
We just thank them for joining us today. Thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us. And we do just want to say that if you do like these videos, please do share, help spread this message out there further. And please also, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, please do comment and let us know what your views are, how you're thinking. It both helps us to understand what you think of the podcast, but it also helps with the algorithms and to spread the word more. And obviously, if you want to stay connected to CUFI UK, please do visit our website, www.cufi.org.uk. And we look forward to seeing you at the next podcast.
And also, if you would like to donate as well support the work, then just add a hashtag and donate to that website.
There you go.
And you will be in the right place, because, of course, your support is really appreciated.
Definitely. Yeah, we really do appreciate all of you listening. we appreciate your support. And Alastair, I appreciate you because
I appreciate you too.
yeah, you've been doing you've been doing a great work, and that was a great interview.
Thank you.
And yeah, we really appreciate it.
Okay.
Cool.
See you next time.
See you next time.